This is going to be the best episode ever. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside. I look at Seaside arcades.
It's not that terrible. Alone in the Dark Rehaunted and the video game horror genre.
Null modem not required. Stunt car racer has got multiplayer. Again.
And a retro search engine along with the revival of a beloved console emulator coming up on this week's show for the week of Saturday the 2nd of May 2026.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello and welcome to the show. Lee, welcome back. How are you?
I'm really good. I've had a brilliant weekend. I'll tell you all about it if you really want this show to go for 2 hours.
I know you were at the cave yesterday for Hoffman's presentation. What was he talking about?
Himself mostly, which was really off-putting, but I mean, that's probably why he was invited. But no, Ian's a lovely bloke. I did get to sit down with him. We had a picnic and we kind of bonded. But he was talking about his remakes and demakes and things like that. He spoke about how he converted the first game. I forget what it was because I was really engaged with the whole thing. And wasn't
Nightmare,
thinking about. Sorry?
Nightmare, maybe?
Nightmare, yeah, and he worked all the way through Golden Axe and up to Secanoid, and which he demade for the Amiga from the PC, and brilliant talk held by him, and a really good day at the cave. I had so much fun. I was exhausted by the end of it.
And you destroyed Neil's car.
I did. Okay, so so Neil drives around in a Sinclair C5 these days, which he's having sign written with the Retro Collective along the side, just because one person, whilst he was driving it around a local estate, this is a true story, one person stopped him and then visited the cave off of the back of stopping Neil and having a conversation about what the hell are you driving. He became somebody that visited the cave. So this is going to be something that Neil, I can see him touring up and down the M4 and with a banner hanging out of the back of his Sinclair C5. But yeah, I did break it.
Yeah, and you paid a bribe to me to get on today. So this is the bribe that you paid to me. This is the multi-retro super duper RAM tester. Basically, I needed something that tested tri-voltage RAM, and you said, "Well, Dave, it just so happens." Yeah,
this is how you get onto leading podcasts these days. So you send presents to nice people on them.
If you're still with us, Captain Context would like to jump in. Hi, that's Dave that led off the show. He's one of our regulars here. I'm Jason. Chris is here as well. And we're joined by Lee from the more fun blanking it empire. Can you quickly catch people up on who you are and what you do?
My name's Lee. I'm a YouTuber, one of them horrible people that talks about themselves all the time, a bit like Hoffman. I make videos about fixing vintage tech and building cool projects for things, and I do a lot of charity work as well, but I don't like to talk about it.
Well, talk about it.
Great place.
Right. So the reason I'm here, the reason I forced my way onto your amazing show this time, and it's similar to the first reason that I was here. That 3 years ago, 2023, we started doing some charity stuff because I thought, well, all of this amazing stuff that I get sent, I could do something really good for it with it. So back in 2023, we did a Sinclair-based event and raised a load of money for the befriending scheme and sold off via auction, which is quite important, a load of computers. And we just had a great time. Did a live stream and some of you were on it. And then in 2024, we did it all again, but this time we did Commodore and we raised a whole heap more money. I think over those 2 years, we raised about £31,000. And we ended up funding some miniature donkeys for the befriending scheme, and which is an amazing charity as well for people with special needs and people that struggle to make friends. It's part of that whole thing of the befriending scheme. It's their core principle is getting people to enabling them to come together in different situations and things. And my son Thomas benefits from the befriending scheme, so it's a double win for me. But this year, or last year, I completely skipped a year because, the 2024 broke me. It was really, really hard. And it's raising money for charity is something that I never expected to be so difficult, because when you do something like this, especially if you've got a way to connect with a lot of people, maybe through a YouTube channel, you get a lot of people that go, I want to get involved in this. Here's something, sell this. And I ended up just being inundated with things to sell to raise money. And it just became too much. So I took 25 off. But this year, we're going to do it a bit different. This year, we're doing raffles instead of auctions. And I wanted to do this before, but the legal minefield all around it put me off. There's a service called GiveWheel that allows you to do this. So I don't have to touch any of the money, which is brilliant. So for tax reasons and legal reasons, they control the whole process. I just put a page up with all the information on it. People buy a ticket, and then I run the raffle and I send out the prizes. You have to do, I should, for legal reasons, I have to say now that there is also a free entry. So if you're really, really tight-fisted and cheap, you can send a postcard with something like, I'm really tight-fisted and cheap, via the befriending scheme and the address. Send it to the befriending scheme and you'll have your name put into the hat as well. Definitely does happen. It didn't on the first one. So we ran an event earlier, a couple of weeks ago, for a test event where I raffled off a Steam Card Pro, which is a ZX Spectrum diagnostic cartridge. And that was just literally a test. I put a £500 target on that, and we raised just over £1,500, just testing out the mechanics of the whole thing. So yeah, the community, well, I mean, everybody knows this community is the best one in the world. The vintage tech and retro hardware and retro gaming people are just amazing. And it brings me to tears every time I think about it, how they come together and help out with these things. But we're going to do it all again. This year, off of the back of that test, we're going to run a series of raffles around 4 to 6 weeks. So probably every time Pixel Addict comes out, we'll have a raffle.
If only.
And the first one is going to be this. This is, the project name is Frankenpete, and this is a Commodore 64 GS, which is their failed games console. And this came about because somebody on Discord, Henry on the Retro Hardware Discord, the best Discord, by the way, is put his hand up and said, look, I've got this Commodore 64 C motherboard, shortboard, which had been pillaged. It had nothing left on it, just a few logic chips, nothing valuable left on it at all. It's going in the bin. Does anybody want it? Another member of the Retro Hardware Discord, Pete, Diceman Pete, said, why don't we do something charity-based with this? And then it exploded, and it's turned into this, and the whole community's come together and built this. There's people like Retrofied Dan who made the labels, and it's Matt Desmond who did the Des Test Max and lots of other things, has made the kernel for this, so it's got a custom boot screen, and there's all sorts of Easter eggs involved in it as well. It's just a thing of beauty as well. But
so you can donate to charity and possibly win it.
Yeah, so you can buy. There'll be a video coming out on my channel this Saturday, or just come out 2 days ago when you see this, which will explain everything. We'll have all of the links that you will need to buy tickets.
Post a comment on the video when it comes out, Lee, and we'll pin it for people to see.
And it will come with this as well.
Oh wow!
Cool.
A reproduction box. Fantastic.
So, yeah. That's a reproduction box, which was, well, I say donated by Neil from the Retro Collective Cave, but we staged a heist. You'll have to watch the video to see, because it's going to be a bit of a story and quite an interesting one.
We need to get into this week's show. If you look at any retro-themed TV or film based in America in the kind of 80s or 90s, there's a good chance you'll see the Mall Arcade. John Connor hanging out in the Galleria Mall in Terminator 2 or Stranger Things, particularly Season 2. These portrayals, as far as I can determine from the wrong side of the ocean, are fairly authentic, even if they're a bit exaggerated and glammed up, or made to look a bit more ropey for TV. They're broadly accurate, I think. We didn't have them to quite the same extent in the UK. We had some, but our arcades came from a kind of different genesis. What we did have, and what we had lots of, and I mean lots, was the Seaside arcade. Now there was, and again I'm on the wrong continent to properly say, but a rough equivalent in the USA. They had boardwalk arcades, I think is the best way to describe it. But I understand these were fairly limited to the East Coast in New Jersey, New York, Maryland mostly. In the UK, we had seaside arcades anywhere there was a seaside town. BACTA, no, not what Luke healed up in, the British Amusement Catering Trade Association estimated between 2,500 and 3,000 of these arcades at their peak. And that's a lot when you realise it's only on the coast. They didn't seem to spring up anywhere else. And what's unique about the UK experience is they were a place where lots and lots of small stakes gambling happened. It's not small snakes, small stakes.
If that's what you gamble for over there.
There was a fruit machine called Adders and Ladders, I guess. But yeah, small stakes gambling. And we think that's normal. UK laws say that small stakes gambling is fine. UK laws are fine with it. US laws are not. This means, and that's why you had pinball machines banned and all the rest of it over there. That means that long before we had Space Invaders going way to Gauntlet and to R-Type to Street Fighter 2 to Cadillacs and dinosaurs and House of the Dead, we had penny pushers, we had fruit machines, we had those little mechanical horse racing games with the do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and lots of others. And you put your coins into a slot, you put real coins into a slot, and you got coins back. So real money gambling for real money. And in the USA, the rules said it had to be a game of skill, and you had tickets and prizes, and to stay within the rules. Whereas in the UK, you might win £3 or £4 from it. Now they did, of course, decline. The National Lottery meant that scratch cards, a form of gambling that we didn't really have in the UK, suddenly appeared in nearly every corner shop. And then the National Lottery itself was there too. And that seemed to absorb some of the gambling urge from people. And the appeal of the electromechanical and then modern arcade games waned as things like the PlayStation and the Amstrad GX 4000 meant that you could play arcade quality games at home. But these seaside arcades still hold a place, and that's where today's submission comes in from Bajako. It's a BBC article with the headline, "Here is why seaside arcades could be lost forever," and it talks about their gradual demise. It does point out that they're still important. It says seaside arcades generated $804 million in turnover and supported more than 14,000 jobs in 2024, according to the Centre for Economics and Business Research. But the sector has been under sustained pressure, with real terms turnover falling by 25% since 2015. And they go on with a quote from Alan Mead, Professor of Game Design at Canterbury Christchurch University. I've actually got his book. It said that people had been enthralled and amazed by arcades since the late 1800s, and they are an essential part of British cultural life. Now, I love these places. They're magical. It's a different world. It's really quite different to the centre of town amusement arcades that we had. I had one in my town. I think those are a bit closer to what we see in Hollywood than the seaside arcades. But the seaside arcade was the first place where I saw everything about flashing lights and machines and all the rest of it. So I want to go straight to our correspondent from the United States of America. What did I get wrong? And did you ever go to boardwalk arcades? And does the idea of gambling absolutely everywhere seem weird to your American sensibilities?
Okay, I'll take those on, not in that order. Being a lifelong resident of the American Midwest, which of course is not strictly in the middle of the West at all, but I've never been to like the traditional New Jersey boardwalk type of shoreline. I do have a somewhat hazy memory close to 20 years ago of visiting a like preserved seaside arcade in San Francisco, which I believe was a museum. They had a lot of like early electromechanical stuff from like the first half of the 1900s, including those type of race games that you talked about. There were some games and some were just animated amusements. But, as has come up a time or two, being from the Chicago area, like That's arguably maybe better because it was such a hotbed of both arcade and pinball manufacture and distribution. So I think we more than punched above our weight during that arcade heyday, in the 80s. As for the gambling everywhere, it did seem odd to me as I learned more about it that it was, just kind of integrated into everyday British life. But there are a couple of qualifiers on that. And the first is that like video poker machines and the like you did and would and still do see those in neighborhood bars and other establishments in places where they are not legal. And sometimes they're tolerated. And sometimes the machine owner who puts it in the bar enjoys a special relationship with local law enforcement. And so nobody gets bothered too much as long as the operator is reporting the income and paying tax on it. And, decades ago when sports betting was illegal almost everywhere in the U.S., national football broadcasts would still have a betting expert on the air talking about odds and betting strategies. So we kind of all knew that there was this underground economy. It just was not, it was done, but it wasn't legal. And honestly, gambling everywhere has been creeping into American culture for the past, 30 years or so, kind of when the whole Texas Hold'em poker thing, caught fire and, seemingly everybody had to have their own game and, aspire to be a national player. You got legalized sports betting in lots of different forms now. Legal casinos of all shapes and sizes have become legal in more and more states. So yeah, the American experience today now I think looks much more like the British experience does than it did, say, 40 years ago.
Chris, did you ever get taken as a kid to Eastbourne? Or what's it like in Oz? Do you have anything like the Seaside arcades in Oz?
Oh, I got taken to Eastbourne and Hastings and Brighton and Weston-super-Mare if we were over in Somerset enjoying our normal summer holiday. They were everywhere, like you say, Dave, these seaside arcades. And exactly as you've already described, most memorable trip was my brother was paying, and first arcade we went into, Terminator 2, he sank £25 because we were trying to beat the game, and we still didn't. £25 in the first half an hour of being in Hastings. Oddly, it doesn't really seem to be a thing here in Perth because, funnily enough, the beach is the attraction. You don't actually need other things to take up your time because you're there to go on the beach and it's nice and sandy and there's lovely water, and as long as the jellyfish aren't there and the sharks aren't biting, you're absolutely fine, and that's what you're there to enjoy. But they do have arcades. Generally, they're all like a franchise. There's a big franchise over here called Time Zone. And even if you find a mini arcade within a bowling alley, for example, it's probably still a Time Zone arcade. And a lot of those have got a combination of the ticket win games, but also like the modern 4-player Halo, light gun game and all that kind of thing. But it's interesting that you mention 2024, Dave, as where these stats come from, because that would have been the last time I went to a English Seaside arcade, and that was in Cleethorpes. And that 804 million you speak of for 2024, I think 20% of that was just me trying to win enough tickets for a model glider. But yeah, they do still exist. And in fact, that one in Cleethorpes was a really nice mix of, they had some retro games in a corner, so those still exist, plenty of penny pushers, and then some of the more modern games where it's all about winning the tickets. So sort of catering to all ages, really.
Lee, lend us 10p. There's a big pile about to go. Look at it.
Just nudge the machine, Dave, like we're used to.
I get thrown out. I get thrown out.
How many times did
that in the fair for doing that?
I'm not going to say what happened to my cousin when he tried to do that in a fair. It ended in violence. Yeah, my experience of arcades growing up, I think I'm a little bit older than the rest of you, and so as a lad, as a young boy, living in a rural part of the UK on the east side, where there weren't any arcades close by. The trip to the Seaside, which would be Clacton for us, was the highlight for me. That was the thing that if we did go to the Seaside, the arcade was my focus. That's where I wanted to be. I wasn't interested. I mean, I'd play on the beach, I'd have a swim, and there weren't any sharks. But it was sandy. And then we'd end up on the pier. And Clacton was what we imagined Las Vegas was like. There's a big, literally, we really did, because there's this big strip that comes up off the pier. If you know Clacton, you'll know what I'm talking about. And there's a road where there are arcades down each side of this road, which are covered in lights, and there's all plastic stuff all over the front of the buildings, and just it looks incredible, especially at night. And that was where I wanted to be. I love the arcade. And it was where things started for me with video gaming, because I'd seen arcade machines in chip shops and things like that before. I'd played Space Invaders and Asteroids and things, but I didn't experience it properly until I was let loose with a pocket full of change in an arcade. But I have to say that I was just as interested in things like the electromechanical stuff as I was in the video games. So things like the shooting galleries. We remember the ones where you walk up and there would be a big bench and the shooting gallery would be behind it, and you pick up a rifle, you put in your money, and you shoot targets to make things happen. I loved all of that. And it struck me when I went to Felixstowe a couple of years ago, when my cousin came over from Australia and we spent the day at the Seaside, and we went to the pier at Felixstowe, and they've turned that into a massive arcade. And it's all like a modern arcade. So it's all of the nice carpet with the, the characters all over it, and the nicely brightly lit and spaced out. You're not cramped in. It's a nice place to be. But they've got all of these machines. They're all electromechanical. It's like the shooting games have water coming out of the pistols and things like. There's all sorts of things, and plus you've got all the modern remakes of things like Star Wars and the light gun games, the Walking Dead, and that sort of thing. But they're all just designed, and they always have been designed just to fleece as much money out of every punter that comes in the door. That's the only reason they're there. But we attach this sense of wonder to them. They are the place that we took out. It was a pilgrimage for us to go to the arcade. But yeah, I love the arcade, and I don't think it will ever disappear. I think it's had its heyday, and it's just transforming into a different thing now. But I think it'll always be here.
Yeah, and it's obviously back in the 80s, and up until we started going to Spain on cheap flights and holiday in the UK was just going to the Seaside. Everyone went to the Seaside. That's all you did. But yeah, of course, things are closer now in the UK to the US, I think. There's ticket dispensing places now, as Chris mentioned, and the video games and arcades aren't the same as the 80s and 90s. They have these big, massive Space Invaders and all the rest of it. It's not the place to go for the most AAA of video gaming experiences. I mean, you've got your consoles and PCs at home. It's a different thing. But I love the idea of penny pushers, and I love the noise of the mechanical horse racing, the ambience of the place, the flashing lights, the tackiness, the worn-out carpets, all the rest of it. I love it, and I hope they stay forever.
All right, this is the week that separates the men from the boys. We are into the fourth pitch, I believe, for our issue 33 of our sponsor this week, Pixel Addict Magazine.
How can we be on the fourth pitch for
I believe we are on the fourth, because they come out, every 6 weeks or so, but they're doing fine work over there. You're going to find a Q&A with David Younger, the joint creator of Foolish Mortals. You're going to find a look at Visionaries, the Knights of the Magical Light. Dave, is there anything else of interest in Pixel Addict Magazine issue 33 that we have not talked about in depth already?
We haven't talked about in depth. Well, we've talked about the cover, the fantastic cover, Monty Mole on it. But no, I mean, there's just so much that we're mentioned already. If you want to get Pixel Addict Magazine, if you want to get hold of it, you would go to where, Chris?
You would go to addict.media, I reckon.
Yeah, and you can get it shoved through your letterbox or put into your mailbox. Or you can get a PDF copy. You can even take out a subscription. Thank you very much for sponsoring us this week, Pixel Addict Magazine.
Now, they won't take it out of your mailbox if you're in the United States unless you put the flag up. There was some excited discussion about this. They don't just randomly take things away from you. You have to put the flag up, and you have to live in a place that they
I thought the flag meant you've got mail.
No. That means take it away.
Yeah, so if you want to put your recycling in there, then put your flag up and they'll take it away.
If you want to be very unpopular with your mailman, yeah. Anyway, if you would like to join Pixel Addict Magazine in sponsoring an episode of This Week in Retro, you would write to us at twir, TWIR, at thisweekinretro.com. My story this week focuses on an area that's outside my usual wheelhouse, because this is a show curated by your posts and your votes on our subreddit, reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. So now I get to talk about a genre of gaming which I'm not terribly familiar with.
It's not that terrible.
No, I mean terribly violent. Or more broadly, the area of horror gaming, which is not my thing, except for the horror games that I do earnestly enjoy, but was the topic of a very popular submission this week by NamTapMai, announcing Alone in the Dark Rehaunted, which is, of course, the H.P. Lovecraftian pastiche way of saying remastered. Alone in the Dark is truly one of the landmark games in serious horror gaming. Using a clever combination of fixed two-dimensional backdrops and 3D animated characters, which are crude by today's standards, but have a kind of unearthly charm about them, Alone in the Dark is the ooze-coated, blood-soaked cousin of Out of This World / Another World. These are games that came out of France, which I think really did take a different tack on questions like, what should a video game be? What should the experience of playing it be? Than games from their Anglophone cousins that, defined so much of the first decades of video game development. Now, I played Alone in the Dark on a 486, which was, a nice way to play it, not too long after it came out. And it did make a big impression on me in a positive way. Gentlemen, I imagine you've run into it at some point over the past, third of a century. What did you think?
I'm going to have to confess I found it janky and I bounced off it fairly quickly. I battled with the UI. I felt maybe there's a good game here, but the UI has put me off.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, this is one of those games that it joins the list of games that it's a weird list, but it's a list that exists. Games that made me want to buy a certain system, in this case, make me want to jump from an Amiga to a PC, but then I never got round to buying or playing. So, well aware of it, love the idea of playing it, have not touched it to this day.
Interesting. Lee?
No, didn't play it. I'm not a horror game fan, so I'm so sorry. But this one's going to be. Well, I've been forced to play horror games in VR in the past, and there is evidence of this online on a certain YouTube channel, which I'll share in direct messages if you really, really want to see me soil myself. But the horror games are not my thing. So even just that title would just make me go, no.
So this particular release says that it's a faithful remaster of the original 1992 survival horror classic, but then goes on to explain it's actually able to run the original 3 games in the series that were published through 1995. The work is credited to Jake Jackson of Spacefarer Retro Remasters, and it appears to be an open source passion project which has nonetheless been blessed by the game's original publisher, Infogrames. Although it's available on GitHub and does require that you own the original game data files rather than bundling them with the release, there's an Infogrames 2026 copyright notice, as well as their logo at the top of the 12-minute gameplay video that NabTabMai pointed us to. And honestly, I wasn't sure how I felt about the idea of remastering this game because, to today's point, 100% agree, it's a janky game to play, but it does have this blend of this crafted 2D backdrops, those extremely low poly 3D animated characters, and it really did create a very specific vibe. And there are a lot of tech specs that are in the announcement, which didn't tell me a whole lot offhand other than we should expect this game to run nicely on modern systems. Quote, it is a from-scratch C++ re-implementation of the Infogrames engine built with modern rendering, BGFX, audio, SoLoud, and input, SDL3 backends, unquote. Anyway, I'm pleased to report that looking at the gameplay video, the janky charm does in fact remain. The gameplay mechanics don't appear to have been reworked, so characters do still lurch and glide about in that peculiar way that they always have. And the models are improved, but they're not too improved. I'm reminded, it's not a perfect parallel, but some of the better episodes in particular, when they did the remastering of the original Star Trek a couple decades ago, they definitely look better than they ever possibly could have looked in the late 1960s on a television budget, but they have not been made to look unrecognizably slick. And just as Alone in the Dark, it took the concept of what easily could have been just an all-text adventure. Apart from some, navigation and aiming challenges for the player, which are real-time and mildly arcadey, the game is structured around discrete rooms, findable items that sometimes need to be manipulated before their true purpose is clear, puzzles which are generally solved of the nature, collect items A and B, deploy them in room X to defeat the killer problem Y, so forth. A remaster could have slicked it up with the same plot points into something that was completely unrecognizable. That hasn't happened here, and I think that's pretty keen. Do you guys have any favorite, remastering or reinvention projects that you'd like to mention, whether it's this Alone in the Dark type deal that mostly sticks to the old ways or something that turned an original concept on its head and made it into something new?
It's funny you mention it because Alone in the Dark did get a remake in 2024, and it was a fairly big budget one. They had David Harbour and Julie Comer, who are fairly big name actors. However, it only got mixed reviews. So I did hear about it at the time, and I thought, that's maybe my opportunity to come back to Alone in the Dark and to actually play it through. Now they're doing this. Surely they'll spend lots of time getting the gameplay right. But the reviews put me off because the reviews are only mixed, so it made me think, nah, let's not bother. So I haven't played it. But yeah, that did interest me.
Yeah, and that was, from what I've seen, that was we took the original characters and some of the concepts, but we created a new adventure around it. It's a different perspective.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not the blended world. And yeah, it does not seem that revitalized the franchise in any ways.
Mine would be Elite Dangerous, because for a couple of reasons. One, the original game made such an impact on me, especially being what it was on such a limited machine back in those days.
Is that what inspired you to be a space pilot?
Is that me driving in the Sinclair C5 being a space pilot on?
Wrecking it.
Definitely.
I was so excited when it was announced, and I followed it. I even joined in on the premium beta, and it's the most money I've ever spent on a single game, because the premium beta alone was £100 just to get access to the game, and then I also had to upgrade my graphics card and buy a VR headset. Well, you didn't have to do these things, but to experience it in the way I did. And then I lived in the game until they added all the rest of the junk that spoiled it again. But in those early premium beta days, it was more like the pure Elite game that I remembered and wanted to play back in 1982 or 3 or whenever it was, 3. And I just loved it. I thought it was brilliant.
For me, it's just the ones I think about are the not so long ago, the remasters of like Quake and Doom on the things like the PS4, because they didn't really change the game. They just, upscaled the graphics a bit, made it play on a modern system, and that's your lot. And for me, that's a fantastic remaster. Make it work on a modern system, make it work well, and then don't touch the formula. That's what I like.
So I've been thinking about the horror game genre and kind of horror as entertainment for a couple of years now, ever since we reviewed Infocom's similarly H.P. Lovecraft-inspired game, The Lurking Horror, on my other podcast, The Retro Adventurers. And there's not nearly enough time, even if we took the whole episode of This Week in Retro, to take a comprehensive look at horror gaming. But I do want to highlight some of the other genre milestones through the lens of being me, who, like Lee, does really, really not enjoy things like being scared or being grossed out. Like, I am now coming up on the 40th anniversary of seeing the iconic chestburster scene from Alien, and I am still not over it. But more about Alien in a moment. I genuinely am curious about the cultural shift that took tales of horrifying deeds, thank you, Dave, strictly out of the, we're going to tell you the story so don't do this type of thing or else realm of dark fable, and into the mainstream of guilty pleasure. Like, I know multiple people who say that watching horror movies and the like helps them manage their anxiety. Some of these people still seem to be pretty anxious to me, but I am not a licensed psychologist, so I'm going to let that go. Some of these games I rattled off from memory, but I did want a little help. And because this is an area where I suspect there has been a lot of large language model content generation lately, I deliberately went back 10 years to find a guide which predates the worst of that kind of thing. It's an article from Gaming Bolt in 2016 called A Comprehensive History of Horror Gaming. We'll link out to that as well. Anyway, by the time you get to the 1970s and the dawn of home computing and video games, horror is obviously a well-established form of entertainment in media, books, films, television. I do find it interesting that some of the earliest standout titles gravitated to a specific format, that of the vampire story, because you have text adventures like 1979's The Count, 1982's Transylvania, but there's also dinosaur horror in the form of 1981's 3D Monster Maze. I know that game comes up a lot.
Dinosaur horror, is that the genre it's in?
I mean, that's kind of what the Jurassic franchise is, right? Lee?
I didn't play 3D Monster Maze back in the day. I had a ZX81. That was my first computer, but it was 1K. I didn't ever have the RAM pack, and then I soon upgraded to the ZX Spectrum. And then one of the first things I did when I got, in this modern age, a ZX81 with upgraded memory, was load up 3D Monster Maze, thinking, it's just 3D Monster Maze. It scared the crap out of me. It really did.
So on the Atari 2600, we had Haunted House, which was a cleverly minimal approach that relies on primitive lighting effects. It makes good use of the 2600's oddball music capabilities to set a very eerie scene. I distinctly remember a young girl peer of mine who would proudly boast that she would noisily lose her mind with anguish and terror whenever the protagonist of Haunted House, which is literally just a pair of eyes, was killed, which involves a feast of sound effects and flashes along with the pupils in those eyes rolling around, which was kind of fun, actually. Like I said, Alien would come up again. It was the source material for an unlicensed 1981 text adventure and a licensed and very cutting-edge 1984 real-time strategy game. Infocom got into the act as well with games like the aforementioned Lurking Horror, Moon Mist, although that's more of a spooky game than actually horrible. On the arcade side, there's the shockingly graphic and unpleasant light gun game Chiller from Exidy that came out around the time of those text adventures. When I think about innovations in horror games in the late 1980s, my mind immediately goes to the improbable Commodore 64 only title Project Firestart, which was a stylish, cinematic, very effective third-person 2D survival title, which should have been much more successful than it was. And I say that objectively, it's a really good game. And it was not doing anything that was going to be impossible to replicate on other consoles or computers of the time. But honestly, also, because I do have, aversion to being startled, spooked, scared, or grossed out, Project Firestart does all of those, and I still really, really, really enjoyed playing it and still do enjoy playing it. But I also learned in the research, thanks to that article, that the Capcom RPG Sweet Home, developed for the Nintendo Famicom, is also considered a massive trailblazer, and it leads directly to things in the 1990s like Resident Evil. This was just a partial list of things in the 1980s. There are obviously other potential favorites out there. Even as an outsider, I can tell that the genre really exploded once you get to CD-ROM. It becomes cheap and very tempting to fill up all that storage space with, comparatively easy to create monster footage or foreboding dialogue or whatever. And then the games become massive business. You're into Seventh Guest, Phantasmagoria, Resident Evil series, and so on.
Was Doom on the list? I just want to know, was Doom on the list?
I don't recall. I mostly stopped reading after the 80s because the 90s got so big, but I would hope.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So by the time Alone in the Dark comes out in 92, and to be clear, that was not designed in its first incarnation as a CD-ROM title. The assets were fairly compact, all things considered. But there was a good deal of growth in this area. But that original latched onto a set of source material, the Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos, these horrors that are so unearthly that you cannot even contemplate them without going mad, and packaged it into a format that high-end computers at the time could handle, and created something that, is really durable, even if none of my peers have played it.
Lovecraftian horror is sometimes called cosmic horror. And cosmic horror feels much more realistic to me than body horror or slasher horror. Cosmic horror, if I want to see a film and there's that kind of folksy cosmic horror, it feels much more scary. And I think when places draw from Lovecraft, and they do, almost everything now draws from Lovecraft, either directly or indirectly from other things that have drawn from it in the past. They can draw from just the horrible-looking tentacle monsters, or they can do it properly and do the whole philosophical dread of it, the idea that if you find out enough about it, you will lose your mind. And the idea that humanity is just a temporary blip in the universe. It's just our reality is a thin facade on what is endless, ageless evil. That's what really appeals to me. And yeah, I think that, the Lovecraft's not short stories and so on. They're proper horror to me. A lot of horror is just drama. And I think Alien certainly managed to go beyond the scary looking monster to tap into those fears. And I don't know about Alone in the Dark because I bounced off it, frustrated with the UI, didn't come back. But it was a game called Aliens that I played on my CPC, my Amstrad CPC. And it's the first game that scared me. There's actually two games called Aliens, but it's easy to tell them apart. Because one came out in 1987 and the other one came out in 1987. And sorry, if that's not enough for you, you have to look at the actual full name of it, because one of them is called Aliens, the computer game, but the other one is called Aliens, the computer game. People end up calling one the US version, and it's not the US version that scares me. It's really good, it's really atmospheric, and it's really impressive what an 8-bit machine like the CPC can do to genuinely scare me. But shortly after that, I ended up playing a dungeon crawler, Dungeon Master, one of my favourite games, and it's genuinely scary. The noises of the monsters that creep up is genuinely scary, and I got the same feeling from that. And of course, by the time you get to the 90s, maybe it's worth pointing out, almost everything is horror. If you play Fallout now, Fallout's got horror in it.
That's true.
Feral ghouls jumping at you, all the rest of it. There's horror everywhere now. It's blended into everything.
I was thinking about that when I was thinking of putting together a list of my favourite horror games. I nearly wrote BioShock, but it's not really a horror game, but there's certainly lots of horror elements, like you say. I had a good reason for asking if Doom was on the list, because Doom's one of those games that it really depends on how you played it. And some people just speed run it and play it as a fast-paced shooter, which it is. But I played it as almost like a sci-fi survival horror, and I got into the lore and the story, and each room I would probe into, see what's going to come at me, back off, run around, try and get some more ammo because I was totally underarmed, and then go back in and try and progress. And that's how I played Doom originally, which is probably why in that franchise not everybody loves Doom 3, but I absolutely love it because it essentially rebooted the series and really leaned into that horror theme.
The arcadey boomer shooter is not as good as the kind of the fear kind of thing, not the game Fear, which you're about to talk about, just the fear you get in Doom, and then Doom 3 and Quake as well.
No, that's right. I mean, my love of horror in terms of movies and games is quite recent, so forgive me for being not quite as retro as we normally are here, but I love the Fear franchise. That is getting quite old now. And also Until Dawn on the PS4. I forgot why I originally wanted it, but essentially it's an interactive horror movie. It's a horror movie. You know, when you watch a horror movie and you're shouting at the character saying, why are you going into that barn? Right? Well, that's what Until Dawn is. It's you're now in control as to whether or not they go into that barn, right? And so it's quite a nice game to play once you accept it for what it is. Because if you forget that, then you just go, well, this is just cutscene after cutscene. Yes, it is, because it's an interactive horror movie. But if you want the more action-packed version, then you go Until Dawn Rush of Blood. So, Lee, you might not like that one, but that is a VR horror game on a roller coaster. VR roller coaster horror. Yeah. But since we've mentioned Alien quite a lot already in this episode, you can't go past Alien Isolation. Fantastic game. Gets your blood pumping, friggin' running around, hiding in lockers down a corridor. And the alien just comes right past, sniffing past you, and there's nothing you can do. If it finds you, you can't kill it for the majority of the game. So love it. Absolutely love it.
For what it's worth, Chris, I did take a look, and partial credit on Doom, they actually call out what at the time was the about to be released 2016 Doom. That's the one that they highlight in that article. They don't actually highlight the original.
Which, funnily enough, that is more of a run and gun. It really is. So, yeah, anyway.
Lee, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I wanted to bounce off of what Chris just said about Alien Isolation, because and Doom as well. I wanted to mirror both of those, because Alien Isolation, did you ever play it in VR though, Chris?
No, because I've got it on PS4 and it never supported PSVR. So I really want to. I really want to
make this happen. So have you played through the whole game?
Yes.
Okay, so I played Alien Isolation and I got in the first locker, and that's as far as I got.
Are you
when
serious?
You get in that first locker, and you can in VR, you can actually look through the grill in the door and see the the headset came off, and I never went back into it again.
So is that on PC? Is it?
That's on PC, yeah.
Right, I'm buying a Quest 2 or 3, and I'm getting that, and I'm doing that.
It's absolutely stunning. The horror in VR is just unlike any other genre. It really is transformative. Agreed. The other one is going back to Doom. You did remind me that Doom is one of the horror games that I would have played from start to finish. And I played I did play it on PC first and on the shareware version, but the full version that I played was on the PlayStation 1, on the PSX. And I can remember playing it in my kitchen with the lights off. I had a telly sitting on the side, and I just a kitchen chair sat in front of the telly about 2 foot away, playing it with my controller like this, my eyes peeled wide. Brilliant.
I got to say, the PlayStation version is 100% a horror game, if for no other reason than the soundtrack, because it's a CD-based audio, and it's not that same heavy metal track that you got on the PC. It is, it's atmospheric, eerie horror. It's brilliant. Yeah.
So I am still not at all sure why things that are scary, horrible, terrifying, or just downright nasty have become relaxing pastimes, but I do know that, yes, to follow up on the game that you guys were talking about, one of the very few long-form gameplay videos I've ever sat down to watch start to finish, over several sessions, was that contemporary Sega classic Alien Isolation, which was, yes, a first-person shooter, or sneaker rather, that I knew I had zero chance of being nervy or skilled enough to beat. Kudos to Lee to even making it that far. But the game does seem oddly compelling enough that I wanted to see how the story played out when controlled by a steely master of the genre. I guess some terrors really do serve double duty as diversions.
I'd like to welcome on 2 new patrons. So thank you very much to Trevor and to Marauder. Trevor has signed up and Marauder's taken up the annual offer. If you'd like to join them and become an official twirler, where would you go? Lee, you are an official twirler. Where would you go, Lee?
You go to www.morefunmaking.co.uk. I'll put a website page on there with a link to my patron, which has got a link to the Twir patron.
Yeah.
Is that the first time this segment's ever been hijacked?
That's what you get.
Patreon.com/thisweekinretro. Thank you for your support, people.
Speaking of thanking you for support, Dave Stewart Thomas dropped a nice review for us on the Apple Podcasts Great Britain feed. It's a weekly treat, says Dave. So thank you very much. And this is all in support of the Duncan's 50th birthday 50 review drive. So if you do drop a nice review for us, please do let us know. I'm doing some searching here, but it's easier if you just tell us.
Top submission this week for News and Briefs is that Ross of the Stop Killing Games campaign has made it to literally the European Parliament, where he spoke to the whole Parliament of Europe. Incredible. And seemingly to a warm reception. So there's a 10-minute video of him speaking, and he does very well. He's come an enormously long way in this, and I hope he's able to make changes that are sustainable for the better for everyone, players, owners of the games, and the companies making them. So thank you to Antiques for Geeks for linking that.
So we all know that this is a cat podcast, and there's the famous cat haiku that ends with the line, "New rule tomorrow." Well, last week we had a spirited discussion about the new Commodore's announced plans to block firmware updates, specifically FPGA core updates that did not come from them. We published that. We had a fine time doing it, but somewhere between us uploading it to YouTube and the episode actually coming out, Commodore said, "Just kidding, new rule tomorrow." They have said, no, we won't be blocking that, but hey, that could change at any time. Thanks for Antiques for Geeks, and many of you already saw that update, and we will keep an eye on these circumstances as they develop.
I don't think it's a big surprise they didn't do it. I think they were only testing the water, obviously, but yeah, I mean, if they do, I think on balance, I don't think I would be outraged by it. I think you persuaded me last week, Jason, that it's not the end of the world. I prefer if it's left open. I would like them to actually force them to be keyed so you can't accidentally or intentionally force it on and on. But yeah, happy with that.
I was outraged.
Were you? No, you weren't.
I was listening on my way to the cave yesterday to the whole show, and I was outraged. So I'm glad they reversed it, because it would have been a poor show.
They never said that you were going to be able to do this. I don't understand.
Here we go again.
Outraged.
Lee, you're not outraged. You are winding us all up. I know you too well.
What if they just released a new Commodore 64 and didn't tell anybody that it partially used FPGA? Nobody would care then, right? No one would care. Anyway, in another piece of news, in News in Brief, Projacco links us to Sega revealing their 2026 lineup, which has lots of retro series in it, including Streets of Rage, Fantasy Zone, and you're going to like this one, Jason, Outrun.
I continue to say racing games are just fine.
Neil, former host, and we promise you can come back on as a guest sometime, Neil, links us to Wibby.me, WIBY.me, a search engine designed to go back in time to the classic web before mega corporations borged everything up. So travel 25 years back in style to a current web search engine that prioritizes lightweight, non-commercial sites. You can search the current web, but you won't just get hit with Reddit, Facebook, all the rest of it.
And there's a new BBC interview with fabled game developer Peter Molyneux about his latest and possibly final game, Masters of Albion. Thanks to King of the Potato People for letting us know. That's what it says.
It does. It's true. After 17 years, there's a new release of ZSNES. The two original developers are back together and have created Super ZSNES, which they say is more accurate than the original classic. Clythorn Alterac, is that right? Yeah, that'll do.
Alterac, and I would say ZSNES.
Yeah, I was going to say
ZSNES is how I'm going with that. Anyway, they link us to a MVG video on the topic.
And there's lots more in the subreddit. Go there if you want to kill a few minutes, or if you want to submit a story, upvote some things, try and get us to talk about something, go there and submit your stories. Thank you very much to everyone who participates in the subreddit.
Things I never thought I'd be doing in my 50s include slamming on the brakes to see if an item on the side of the road is a TV or a beige computer, going to the local or not so local dump and jumping in the bins, but here we are. But it didn't start recently, because I used to do it as a kid and a teenager as well. Before the age of 7, I would be on local demolition sites looking for pram wheels to make a go-kart, or nice bits of wood with which to make a toy sword or a bike ramp. Fast forward to my teenage years, and I was looking for something else. Before I go on though, guys, what's your earliest memories of dumpster diving, Dave?
Bin raking is what we called it. Bin raking. Dumpsters are the American word, so bin raking sounds even worse. I don't remember doing it. The only place near me like that was the local tip, but tramps lived there. And now I wonder, is that a real memory? Is that a dream? Does this tip exist? Did the tramps live there? I don't know.
Were you watching Stig of the Dump too many times? Because that was a TV show. That was the theme, right? Maybe.
Does Stig of the Dump mean that tramps lived in dumps? Is that true?
Well, I don't know. Jason?
Yeah, I never had the nerve or disregard for the chance of my contracting tetanus or any of that sort of thing. But because there were those legendary text files, right, that would say like, oh, if you just go down to your local telephone office, they throw away all sorts of equipment and computers or whatever. You just reach in and grab it. Like, that sounds amazing. I'm not going to do that.
Lee?
I didn't do any dumpster diving, no, but I was, being an adult at the time when computers were becoming obsolete, because I was around when they were invented. I used to grab, people's discarded PCs and turn them into the insides of arcade machines. So that was my pastime, but I'm never out of a dumpster.
Interesting. Jason, the legends you speak of are true, because in my Amiga years, there was a disused British Telecom building near my street, and they began clearing it out prior to demolition. And I recall my friends and I going through the skips out the back, scrounging for anything that looked interesting, basically. And it's a relevant memory, as one of the key things we pulled out was lovely, extra long cables. And with mine, well, I handed it over to my slightly older mate, Daryl, because he'd learned the secret art of soldering. And along with some D25 connectors that I got off a guy from church who ran an electronics component business. And a few days later, I collected from Daryl a handmade RS-232 Null modem cable to use with my Amiga. I later learned, obviously, how to make my own, and I'd frequently do that because they'd always break. But that initial cable, the one that I got out of that bin and that Daryl soldered up for me, was 10 meters long. It was fantastic. And from there began a wonderful period of link-up gaming with my mate Steve. Hi, Steve. He listens and watches. And he would bring his Amiga round to my house, and we'd link up and play games, and occasionally I'd take my Amiga to his. And it seems stupid now, but in this modern, interconnected, always online world, back then, in the late 80s and early 90s, machines were standalone. You just turn them on. They were connected to nothing for the most part other than the screen. So there was something incredibly special about getting two machines connected, and even better when they actually talk to each other. That was huge. And of course, multiplayer was a thing, without all this hassle. You could do it split screen or whatever with a dedicated machine, but being able to actually link up with a mate and set it up in a way that you couldn't actually see each other's screens just made it that much more special. The games we played for the most part were Honda RVF, F-16 Combat Pilot, and of course, Stunt Car Racer. Fast forward to the modern day, and we take online multiplayer gaming for granted. But when it comes to retro gaming, especially through emulation, that kind of important part of the historic gaming is kind of forgotten, and you can't do that through emulation. Not that I'm aware of anyway. We actually mentioned that a few episodes back. And what we also mentioned was that there's a new PC browser-based version of Stunt Car Racer, and we talked about how good it was. Well, it's got even better. And thanks to Binary Foundry for sharing this on the subreddit, and I'm pretty sure he's the guy behind this project, you can now play Stunt Car Racer in your browser, including the TNT tracks, so the extra tracks, and you can play them multiplayer in either split screen or online link up. So this isn't what I was asking for when I mentioned in the past that I'd like to see emulators use the internet to mimic RS-232. I'd still like to see that happen. And it would be great if things like the A1200 from Retro Games Limited allowed link-up play. But I still think this is fantastic. Now, I could see, for example, if I'm better than Neil from the Retro Collective, in theory, we could have a link-up game of Stunt Car Racer. He may have been able to beat me at Super Skid Marks and Golden. I think he beat me at GoldenEye when I visited the cave. But he couldn't beat me at pool, and I'm pretty confident we'd have a great match in Stunt Car Racer. So I'm really glad that in 2026 this is a thing, because maybe I'll find out who would win that match. Full links in the show notes as always, but he's got a link to his Patreon page, but you don't need paid access to see the project, and he details the whole project in there. He's got a link to direct play the game online, and there's also a link to his Discord as well. And it looks like he's doing some interesting work on other games, such as Alien Breed 3D from the Amiga. Looks like he's playing about with that. So guys, what are your earliest memories of specifically link-up gaming, or even just the magic of getting two or more machines to talk to each other? Jason?
Yeah, I mean, the world of online games, even the single-player ones on bulletin board systems from the late 80s, early 90s was really amazing to me. It was slow and inefficient, but it really felt magic. It's not quite what you're talking about with the local link. I am struggling to think of the first game that I played with a Null modem or LAN link-up. I know that my friend Mark, brought me to his office a couple times for their evening Rise of the Triad death matches. That's, fairly late in the game. My college department had a Mac network. I'm pretty sure that a few of us would play Networked Marathon at some point. And by the way, it's been a few episodes since those of you with the secret objective card Neil mentioned in at least 3 segments of an episode has hit, but you collected those points today. That's 3rd segment with a Neil mention. Congratulations.
My computing teacher, very briefly, showed us a game running on the BBC Micros at school in, I think, 1988. It was only for a couple of minutes. And I'm fairly sure it would have been Shades Mud running on Prestel. Now, the screen looked a bit like teletext, and that's why I know it was Shades Mud. It was years later in the 90s that I would do it myself properly. My first Mud was Sleepless Nights, a smallish Mud, and I'd move on to other ones, many I've forgotten the names of. And the one I played the longest was Juris, which was exceptionally brutal for PK, player killing as far as Muds went. It was really quite knife in the back stuff. And they absorbed my whole life. But before that, we'd go to each other's houses and play and watch each other play or take on adventures together, text adventures or Dungeon Master. We'd play 2-player Lemmings, which was just as brutal as Juris Mud. I do remember playing Linked Up Doom and X-Wing versus TIE Fighter in someone else's house, having hauled my PC up to John's house to play that. I remember playing those, and that was amazing. But things really took off for me when I got a phone line and I played Muds online. I would stop existing in the real world. I would exist in that Mud. That's all that mattered to me. I would go have a quick shower every 7 days or something and have something to eat. I was thin back then. Probably why I was thin back then. I would play these Muds, and that's all that mattered to me. 18 hours a day in this Mud, absolutely absorbed in this linked up world with someone else. That was amazing, and that's why it's now 19 years since I played a game like a Mud. It was EVE Online, so a massively online game. 19 years since I played one, and I'm scared to play another.
So is that dial-up at local phone call rate?
Yeah.
18 hours a day?
This is when I first started playing Muds, it wasn't 18 hours a day, but I was spending all my earnings just about on paying the phone bill. And then once we got Red Hot Ant, which was the unmetered dial-up, and then we got broadband, that's when there was no reason not to be online playing them.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. Wow.
For me, video gaming is all about the experience of playing with someone else right from the very beginning. When I've known my best friend Jason for 50 years this year, and we've had the same computers all through our lives, and we've done up until like last year, we've been playing things like Project Cars and Assetto Corsa online with his brother in Australia. So you can do it, but we did go through the whole thing in the Amiga days with piling the whole kit, including a colour TV, into my car, driving it all the way to his house in the next town 30 minutes away, unloading it all, setting it all up in his house, connecting the computers, and then playing for the first time together Stunt Car Racer. And that was, what an experience. It's just absolutely amazing that you could troll someone and knock them off the track and do these sort of things without them seeing what's gonna happen. It was spoiled for us with split screen gaming, because things like Spy v Spy, you could see where the traps were by just looking across at their half of the screen. But if you put the screens back to back, and then it just changed everything. And we play all sorts of things like flight simulators, where we just like fly around saying, "Where are you?"
Yes,
for an hour, and then getting bored, and then going back to Stunt Car Racer. And then we ended up, I think, playing Populous 2 for many sessions. And that was just, I think that's where the online gaming really took root in my mind. And it's because for me, all of this, the whole YouTube thing and the video gaming thing, has all been a way to connect with other people. That's what I really like.
Old habits die hard, and when I found myself with both a 386DX and a 486SX in my bedroom in the mid-90s, it was still RS-232. I used to connect them not just for Doom, which ran poorly, but also for transferring or backing up MS Office from one machine to the other, because I didn't have the legit discs. I love that in the modern day, though, my now adult sons could continue to game together, despite now living in completely different suburbs. Or that I can play my schoolmate Lee at Quake 3 Arena or Battlefield. I won't, because he's in the UK and the ping would be terrible, but I could. But oddly, and to close, I do now lament at what multiplayer gaming was before all this, and before we did it via link up. I do miss being in the same room, sometimes on the same couch, sharing a pizza, split screen or same screen, having a great laugh in person. Well, this version of Stunt Car Racer, that does both, and that's brilliant. It's time now for our community question of the week. And are we out of contest mode, guys?
Yes, we are.
Fantastic. So I'm the only one that hasn't opened the page. Brilliant. Right.
The question
Lee. What was the question of the week, actually? The question of the week was, what button mashing game would you love to play on a replica Neo Geo controller, being apparently the best controller in the world? So, Lee, do you want to read out the top answer?
The top answer is from Osprey Shower and Daley Thompson's Decathlon. Why break and waste a Quickshot 2 or a Cheetah 125 when you can use and still break one of the best joysticks out there? Good answer.
True. That will break anything.
From Sir Drexel, we get button mashing, you say? How about a new game, Neo Trackmasters, a remake derivative of Track and Field with Neo Geo graphics? I sense a trend.
Jeff Mendoza says, this is something I already do. SNES Street Fighter 2 using a Neo Geo CD controller on a Mister. The D-pad is precise enough to do the special moves properly, and the clicks are satisfying too. So this is a D-pad handheld kidney bean-shaped controller with micro switches on the D-pad. To Jason's point, I'm not stuffing the ballots. He's just bitter because he's unable to really enjoy Outrun. It's a bit personal there, Jason.
Another shot.
Totally fine.
Meow.
Cool. As there's four of us, I'll read out a fourth one. Sheepy Tina says, My Dinner with Andre, an arcade game from The Simpsons. There we go. Not sure if that actually exists or not, but if it doesn't exist, then the joystick's fine.
Quop. Street Fighter the movie, says someone. No, boo. New question. What's the scariest, most horrifying, or revolting moment that you've had with a classic video game? Lee.
Can I give my answer now?
Yeah, go on. Give your answer now.
Mine was in the VR thing when I did I think it's called The Belows. It's a VR horror experience. And my friend Richard, who's in a previous life, I was on a podcast called Ready Player 2. And he was in my ear the whole time, just, we were doing a bit of chat as I'm walking through. And he waited till the quietest moment of that game when I was really, nervous and not sure what was going to happen. And he full-on, blood-curdling screamed in my ear. I completely lost it.
Good on you, Richard. Well done.
Brilliant.
Here's where to go to answer the question of the week. Reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, where you can find the question of the week and you can submit things. You can read what's been submitted, upvote them, downvote them. Thank you very much for joining us this week, Lee. Remember to have a look for Lee's comment, which he will put on and we will pin once the show goes live on Saturday. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see
More
you next
guests
week.
coming.
Yeah, more guests coming. Even more guests coming. Too many guests coming.
Too many guests. Get the guests
time.
on.
I'm a guest.
We welcome our return guests like Lee, and we're going to welcome on a couple of first time guests, I believe, in the weeks to come.
Cool. Shall we wave? Dave's waving. Lee's waving. Jason is waving, and I am waving also. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.